let's flip then to the other game, which you obviously took in and you wrote about for Transfermarkt. And
Yeah.
I just mentioned there that Hansi Flick is one of the few managers that does have a better record to Luis Enrique in terms of points per game in the Champions League. But you wrote a really interesting article for Transfermarkt on Tuesday night, explaining maybe why his particular style of football maybe led to Barcelona's downfall in the Champions League this season.
Because they're leaky as hell. They cannot keep the ball out of their net.
I think that was what you wrote. That's all the article is. It's just Barcelona are leaky as hell.
They're leaky
Case
as
closed.
hell. They've conceded since the start of the 2024-25 season, which is when he took charge, right? They've conceded 44 goals in the Champions League in 26 games. That is the most of any team, ahead of Club Bruges. Interestingly enough, also just ahead of Atletico Madrid, who have conceded 42, but beat them today, right? And I think Barcelona, this was a criticism that goes back, right, when he was at Bayern Munich. Not the half season he took over and led Bayern Munich to a title, to the treble. They were actually defensively quite sound. But then in his first 4 years, they scored 99 goals in the Bundesliga, but conceded 44. That's a staggering amount of goals conceded, right? In the Champions League, they were always good for 1 goals against. And then when he took over the national team, the defensive stability was what led to his demise, right? And he's taken this to another level at Barcelona. The football is gorgeous to watch, but the defensive is a huge problem. And, yes, they are second only to PSG in goals scored. In fact, if you take goals per game, they're first in that time span under Hansi Flick, with 2.88 goals scored. But, without defensive football, you're not going to get into the later stages of the Champions League and you're not going to win that title. And that is ultimately, I think, what is going to be the biggest talking point about Barcelona, right? I think Flick has been given the task to bring a Champions League title to the new camp. And for him to do that, I think he needs to learn how to defend.
Yeah, it's such an interesting one because, as you said, Flick has his kind of whole managerial history and almost baggage that he takes with him to Barcelona, but also Barcelona has a huge amount of baggage that they've offloaded onto him in the sense that he's replaced Xavi, who, was you could argue how successful he was a Barcelona manager, but the biggest criticism was that his teams were quite boring. So Hansi Flick has obviously been hired with the clear intent of making Barcelona fun to watch again. Now, anyone who watched Tuesday night's game against Atletico Madrid would certainly say they are fun. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Whether they're successful is certainly up for debate. And I thought it was quite telling that, they go 2 goals ahead with some outstanding football, Lamine Yamal and then Ferran Torres with a great finish. And then, there's a second Ferran Torres goal that gets ruled off for offside. But it's also quite telling that the moment that decided this game and decided to tie was when Eric Garcia pulls down the Atletico Madrid player because they beat that offside trap. And you can only do it so many times before you do get caught out in that. And then you compare it to Diego Simeone, who is the king of pragmatism. He's the guy who would happily sacrifice anything at the altars of success as long as it helped his team get through to the next round of the Champions League. And while I think you could probably make a strong argument that he and Atletico Madrid are maybe kind of not quite at the same peak they were back in the day when they were kind of going toe-to-toe with Real Madrid for Champions League titles, this game felt like kind of classic Atletico Madrid to me, and classic Diego Simeone, where they just found a way to get through this. They weren't exciting. They weren't playing fantastic football. They weren't playing bad football, but they were up against a team that were determined to try and play football the right way, and ultimately they ended up winning. And I thought it was a really fascinating stat, Manu, and I think it's true. I'm 99% sure it's true that I read before the game that Diego Simeone had never lost a home tie, I think, knockout game in the Champions League. This is the first time he has done so, but it won't matter because they obviously got past Barcelona.
I think the stat is also that he's never lost a home tie when he won the away tie first. Like it would always go through if they won away first. But we do know it was Diego Simeone's first win in Barcelona, right? At first
Yeah.
leg. And yeah, I mean, it's funny because when they made it 2-1, and that was quite early on in the game, right? 34th minute. You kind of get the sense like, oh yeah, they're going to be able to shut that down. And that's just because it's Atletico Madrid, and they did. And I think that is really interesting.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, that's why we love the Champions League. It's why we
Yeah.
love talking about football every week, because we have these narratives and we have these discussions, and with every passing round in the competition, we get to explore these discussions more and more.